So our first session of this faculty development program will be taken by Professor Janani Sri Muralidharan from the Mechanical Engineering Department of IIT Bombay. So ma'am, over to you. You can start your session, and thanks a lot.
Okay. So welcome everyone. So I have been looking at the schedule and I find that you are doing some amount of single phase flows right up to maybe turbulence modeling, and then following on you're moving into multi-phase flows, some gas liquid flows, and you have some Eulerian type of treatment. Uh, so a lot of challenging advanced problems is being taught to you in this workshop. So I think it is going to be a very good learning experience. But deriving from there, because it's going to be an advanced uh, module, what I would like to understand first, because I understand she's asked a lot of departments, so I can see mechanical, aeronautical professors. So, how many of you are familiar with computational fluid dynamics as a subject? So, first I'll ask you if you have undergone the subject as a student. And furthermore, if somebody has taught or is teaching CFD, you can say teaching CFD into the chat window. So if you can let me know how your experience with CFD is. Okay, somebody says transport phenomenon. Okay. So this will just help me, teaching CFD in PG classes. Fantastic. Okay. Studied CFD. Okay. Teaching CFD. Oh, very good. Okay, you've used all commercial. Okay. Okay, fantastic. Okay, somebody is working on a CFG project. Okay, studied simple flows. Okay, introductory knowledge, self-study, that's perfectly fine. Yeah. Okay, studied CFD but not teaching. Okay. Okay, studied CFD. Okay. Neural network solutions. Okay. Okay, so the reason my question was this was because today my lecture is going to, several of you probably, because we have 68 participants, right, at this point, and maybe a handful, 10 to 20 people seem to know CFD. So I'm going to go ahead and the goal of my session would be to give you a very quick overview of people who don't know CFD, of course, or even if you know, just a quick recap on what is the CFD in a nutshell, what is the procedures, and we're going to kind of segue from there into what is the structure of OpenFOAM per se into this overall CFD as a subject, right? How does OpenFOAM derive from there? How is it structured? So that you can intuitively find your way around OpenFOAM to an extent and understand what the code is about. Okay. All right. So first and foremost, CFD is what is known as computational fluid dynamics. And the whole idea of this is to be able to accurately model capture fluid, but not just fluid, but also heat transfer problems. And CFD as a package is now kind of expanded to take in multi-physics problems like magnetism, so on and so forth. But despite all these additional packages, the fundamental equations are going to be your conservation equations, which is of mass, momentum, and energy, right? So of these three equations, which you're talking as mass, moment, and energy, we probably would have in our school days been introduced in it in a very systemic framework, right? For example, F is equal to ma is wherein, an apple falling or something of that sort is very common and intuitive for us, right? Now, the fundamental question is, how does F is equal to like a system, which is apple, and you say force F is equal to ma, can I apply that to a pocket of fluid? Now, there's an apple which is rigid. Yes, I can track its movement, but how do I track flowing fluid is the fundamental question. How do I apply conservation laws to this moving body, right? And the very fundamental law that actually takes or enables us to do this, right, is the Reynolds transport theorem. Okay, so can anyone tell me what the Reynolds transport theorem tells us? You can just unmute and talk, right? Of course, not people who have taught CFD, of course, but anybody else wants to take a shot at the Reynolds transport theorem?
Mass conservation over a control volume and control surface.
Okay, so is Reynolds transport theorem purely a conservation of mass theory? It is a conservation of mass.
Any extensive property.
Okay, that's correct. So essentially, the thought process was that there are two frames of reference, right? So either in the fluid, I could take a single particle and kind of trace its movement, which probably is ideal, right? And that's called the Lagrangian framework. But also in most of the industry problems, this computationally becomes very difficult to do, right? In many, not all. And now with computational power, it's a different story. But traditionally, one would think of the Eulerian approach. Now, what is the Eulerian approach? The Eulerian approach pretty much presumes that, you're standing, you are not traveling with a single particle, but you are standing in one location in space, and you're just taking a window and you're seeing what is coming in and going out, right? So then what is this interest space where you're monitoring what is coming into that space and what is leaving out is called something called the control volume. So we are moving from, looking at that system, which is a set of apple and just tracking where it's moving, to, remaining stationary and allowing something entering a control volume and leaving a control volume. So the Reynolds transport theorem pretty much enables you to convert this systemic formulation of conservation into something which can be applied in a controlled volume where things are allowed to enter and exit. Okay, so now what happens is that the Reynolds transport theorem gets broken up into two terms, right? On the left-hand side is what you call as the systemic conservation law, right? And when I apply it to a control volume, which is all the terms that you see on the right, what happens is in the control volume, how do I, in a way, look at conservation? Conservation will be a property wherein there is something entering and exiting through the surface. So there is going to be a surface integral term wherein you are integrating what is entering and leaving the surface. And also there is something which talks about the change within the control volume. Say there is some production term within the control volume, then you take into account that as well. So essentially a systemic conservation gets converted into something which is an flux term across the surface, that is flow of the property per unit area of the surface, and the change in the property within the control volume. Okay, so N being this specific property, and all of this math I will just skip. Essentially, it is going to be what is the outflux term and the generation term. Okay, so now when I have this generic principle, I start applying it to all of my conservation equations of interest, which is of mass and momentum if it's fluid flow, and energy if it's also having some kind of a temperature or heat transfer, largely, right? So what happens is, for my mass, for example, if I have a system law, I would say mass conservation, essentially, right? So net change in the mass, unless there is phase change or some kind of reaction, it's going to be zero. And what you have on the right hand side is the mass that's coming in and leaving through the surface. And this is your production term, right? And this I'm writing it as, per unit volume, right? Now, if I extend that to the momentum again will have your systemic law says surface force and body force. So surface force is written this way. I think this is standard. And this is your body force. But this system law gets converted into what is called the control volume law, which has the momentum change across the control volume and the change within the volume. Okay. All right. So essentially, till now, what have we learned? Mass, momentum, and energy conservations are fundamental for my CFD framework. And this does not automatically come into my Navier-Stokes formulation. No, it's a systemic law which, when converted to a control volume framework through the Reynolds transport theorem, transitions to what you have traditionally in your CFD codes. Okay. All right. Now, slightly, we now need to get into looking at these equations in two different perspectives, right? One is what I would call the mathematical perspective, and one is called the numerical perspective. Okay, now what do I mean by this? When I have a mathematical perspective, I'm more interested in thinking about what is the kind of physics I am trying to, that I see outside in nature, into a mathematical form, right? So in a way, you have equations which are, for example, right now I'll forget about the mass conservation, right? So the momentum and the energy, if you look at those two equations, there seems to be, do you see a pattern between the two equations that I have written? Anyone?
There is an accumulation term of energy as well as the momentum.
Okay, good. Anything else do you see?
Just like sensible heat transfer term. So
Hmm.
there is a kind of similar term in the momentum also.
Agreed. Agreed. I agree with you. Anyone, any other things that you see? So right now I have just used the conservation laws for the system, applied the Reynolds transport theorem on that, and this is the kind of equations we have arrived at. But what I would like you to pay attention to are, of course, there is this temporal term, which is the accumulation term, but what is more important is, can you see the second term over here? It's a V dot, so what is this term called? Anyone?
Ma'am, that is convection term.
That is convection term.
Uh,
Okay, so one is, of course, the convection term, what you term as this V dot del as a convection term, right? And then you have this other mathematical term, there's a del square T, right? So essentially what I'm trying to point out is there is a temporal variation. Then there is, of course, this del P, which is the pressure gradient, which is driving the flow, right? Then you have your gravitational force. But the two main things here are these two terms. In the momentum term, it's the advection and the diffusion, right? So when you see mathematically, in the temperature also what is we know as convection and diffusion. So essentially, when I look at mathematically, the physical part gets turned into what is known as the transport equation, right? So what is a transport equation called? The phi can be velocity or the phi can be a temperature term, right? So transport of any particular, can I call it variable, right? Velocity or the temperature. So transport of the momentum contains two main terms, which is your advection term and your diffusion term. So can somebody tell me what is the difference between, we're talking about transport. So what is the difference between advection and diffusion?
Advection is due to the turbulence or the velocity gradient which is present there. And the diffusion is due to the concentration difference or the difference in the chemical potential at system.
Okay,
Madam,
yeah, please go
yes.
ahead.
Actually, convection is due to the bulk fluid motion,
Okay,
and diffusion is due to the molecular motion.
okay, good, very good. So what we're talking about as advection is mostly a bulk movement in a particular direction that's happening, whereas diffusion is more randomized, less directional control over, of course, driven by molecular movement, right? So what we're trying to say is, if you're seeing movement or transport of a particular variable, maybe momentum or even temperature, this is going to be governed by two things. One is movement as a bulk in a particular direction, plus a vibratory direction-less or all directional movement, transmission of either momentum, okay, or temperature difference, okay, energy movement. So essentially you're talking about, now what happens, we're talking about physics, which is a mathematical representative construct, is actually a transport equation. So this is kind of the mathematical construct, the physics coming into the mathematical framework. But when I'm starting to think about in terms of CFD codes, then I need to be able to identify. So there are two ways I can do a code, right? I can write a full entire solver or a subsection for the momentum solver. And then I could write an equal number of lines solving the energy equation. Am I correct? So in numerical terms, when I'm talking about coding, what becomes important is for you to make things efficient, but also if I have inefficient repetitive practices happening, the challenges of the code to diverge, not converge, is a lot more. So my goal and focus should also be on making it very efficient. Okay, so if I'm trying to make it very efficient, then there is a need to identify similar patterns, which is why, this physical collapsing of this equation into a transport equation is very useful for me in the numerical framework. Because what I will operate on is I will create a subroutine of calculating the advection term. If it's the momentum equation, I will send in the velocity. If it's the temperature equation, I will send in the temperature variable, right? But the subroutine in itself will be an advection subroutine and a diffusion subroutine and a transport equation solver, right? So that is the numerical aspect of it, which becomes very, very important. You will understand the importance of breaking it into this equation when you're looking at OpenFOAM. Okay. So now when you are looking at in a numerical perspective, then what becomes important is what is easily solvable, what is not easily solvable, right? So now what did I say? I will send in velocity or I will send in temperature, and I should be able to solve this subroutine on its own. Now, when I have temperature coming in, it's pretty much routine. I can probably solve it because this still is not a, it's not a nonlinear term. But when I bring in velocity into this, then this becomes a nonlinear term. And that is very difficult to solve, or it is challenging to solve in complex flow problems. Okay, so then you try to find out numerical schemes which should be able to have it. You have to linearize it and then solve it. Okay, so those are the subtle points which now we will understand how OpenFOAM deals with this when we come to the latter part of the talk. Okay, so right now we have learned what is conservation equations. We have learned how the Reynolds transport theorem, converts it into a control volume framework. We've kind of looked at it in the terms of identifying the physics aspect of it, which is mainly convection and diffusion, which is into a transport equation, and the subtlety that one term can become nonlinear, especially in the velocity framework, especially the advection term, which is challenging to solve numerically. Okay, so now going forward, we have looked at the equation. Now we need to understand how your code actually solves it, or your computer solves it, because this is a partial differential equation and computers need an algebraic equation to solve, right? So now what we're going to do is try and understand in a very simplistic framework very quickly how the actual background CFD code works, okay? So the idea which most of your CFD solvers will do is, first step is meshing. So what does meshing mean? It takes a domain in which you have a fluid flow to solve, and it discretizes this domain into smaller boxes, only because then I am able to ensure my conservation equations are satisfied in each one of these boxes. The smaller the boxes, more number of boxes within the domain, which would mean at smaller locations, I am ensuring conservation laws are met, right? So it is important you kind of ensure a very fine mesh. There are caveats to this because sometimes people do a very fine mesh and that actually enhances the errors. I'm not going to talk about that, but in general, smaller boxes will help you ensure conservation in every small location. Okay, so now I've made smaller control volumes. Why? We are interested in looking at it from a control volume perspective. And what we start doing is, now I have to solve the equation in that single box first, right? Now, when I look at the partial differential equations, right, these equations, this is for a unit volume. Am I correct? So when I'm solving this equation, I have a box, but this is like a unit point, right? So which point within the box am I solving it for? Typically, in CFD, the practice is that the center of the cell is where this equation is presumed to happen. And then what do? I integrate it. I integrate it for the entire control volume, right? So whatever I am solving for, now I integrate it for the entire control volume along delta x and delta y. And when I solve it and I get say a velocity or temperature, I attribute it to that single point right at the middle of the control volume. Okay. So if I have one velocity here and another velocity here, then to determine for this cell, I will automatically attribute for this cell as the center point location here, and I will take an average of these two and put it here typically. Okay, so it's very important to understand what assignment you're doing. This is actually an assumption that you're doing to solve, right? And so essentially we are meshing, and then we will be integrating the PDE, right? And once we integrate it, you will get an algebraic equation. You will see that. And then I will solve those equations. Okay. So let's take an example. Okay. So I have just taken a bar, right? We'll just do conduction first. So in the conduction, can you tell me, is this a transport equation you're seeing in front of you, the red written equation?
Yes.
So I see Mr. Aditya is answering. Other people, I would hope for you to also engage. Okay. So it's very good to know that Aditya is with us and listening. So I would like similar responses for everyone else. So the question to everyone else is how is this transport equation? Yes, it is a transport equation. What are the terms that are not present there? I only see two terms.
Temporal term is missing because it is steady.
Okay, that's correct.
And also convection term is not there because it is conduction problem.
Perfect. So what we don't have is the advection term or the convection term. And because it's conduction, we only have the diffusion term. And instead of phi, we have the temperature already in it. Okay. And I have kept the source term, right? So 1D steady state conduction is the equations of around this rod. And now the first step, what did I tell you? You need to divide the domain into smaller control volumes. So I've decided to divide this into 3 control volumes, right? And now I have written the PDE, okay? But what do I have to now do? I have to start integrating this PDE, right? So when I have to integrate this PDE, so this is the equation. And when I integrate it, so how do I integrate it? From where to where, right? So there are 3 control volumes. Say I'm going to first look at the center control volume, okay? So that is the present control volume. And you have what is known as the west cell and the east cell for the present control volume, okay? So when I have this, then from where to where do I integrate? I have to integrate this, and this is 1D, if you notice, right? So I have only the x direction. So if I have to integrate, I will be integrating it for this particular cell. So in the x direction, the farthermost point for the cell is the west wall, right up to the east wall, right? So I will integrate it right from the west to the east, okay? So that is what I have written here. When I integrate this term, it becomes k dt by dx, which is what you see here. And I will integrate it from the west to the east. So upper limit minus the lower limit plus s delta x being this length. Okay. So when I do this, now I have this equation, which is a dt by dx, right? So that is at the east. Now look at where it is. It's at the east wall. So that is this yellow line, which is the east wall, right? So in the previous case, I've written this to be the east wall. So I need dt by dx on this line, right? And what is this dt by dx denote? Gradient in the x direction. So I need gradients in this direction at this location. So the way I do it is, I at least presume a linear variation. So there is a TE minus TP divided by small delta XC. Small delta XC is the distance between these 2 points. So I say the temperature difference between these 2 points divided by the distance will give me the gradient at this point. Similarly, for the west cell wall, I do the difference between the temperatures divided by the distance between them. Okay. So then what do? I am solving this entire equation for temperature. So what do? And what temperatures? The cell center temperatures, the capital numbers, right? So I kind of create an equation for all the temperatures. So that is what I've done. I've just opened all the brackets and gathered coefficients for each temperature point. So TP is a variable, TE is a variable, T west is a variable. All these are unknowns, right? Cell center temperatures, which I have no idea of. But I know what is the conductivity. I know what is the distance between the cells because I am only meshing, right? So I do know what these coefficients are. Okay. So I create an algebraic equation where the coefficients are known, but the variables are the temperature variables. Okay. Now what do? I just augment it, and I've turned it into a generic writing at this point. So this is the entire transport equation. You were looking at only the diffusion term. Now, with the diffusion, I am also going to add the convection part of it, right? So the convection part of it and the diffusion part of it is there. I've removed the temporal. I'm imagined it to be steady state. Okay. So then what do? This is the PDE, and then I integrate it from the west to the east, right? And when I integrate it, what you will get is similar to the diffusion term that you saw last time, as well as this will become only this term east to the west one. Okay. I hope everything is clear till this point. I'll just leave that on the screen for a few seconds so that you will follow through. Okay. All right. So when you have this equation, right, we already know how you are going to calculate this gradient term, right? Now, this term actually means at this wall, I don't want the gradient, but I want the value. So a good way to do this is probably take an average. That is not always efficient. So, but I am just doing it here for simplicity, but you have several schemes, advanced schemes, which you can do to get the value here. I can take 5 cells here, 5 cells here, and then take a value here. But very simplistically, you take the average. So I will get, when I substitute that and open out everything, I can create an algebraic form of the equation again. Okay. So quick recap. What did we do? We looked at systemic laws getting converted into a control volume. We then learned for finite volume method, right? Which is because we are operating on control volumes, how you're going to talk about meshing, and using the mesh, how you write the partial differential equations into algebraic equations. First by integrating and making certain choices. What are the choices you've made? Anyone?
The temperature variation was linear.
Absolutely. And the other one was a central difference scheme, right? You made one numerical scheme choice for your advection term. You made another numerical scheme choice for your diffusion term. And you've got a set of equations, right? And those equations, each cell will have one equation for temperature, one set of equations, U, V, W for momentum, and a conservation equation. Okay. So now question comes, I have this bunch of system of equations and I need a solver for this system of equations, right? So I can isolate all the coefficients into an A matrix. The T is the unknown matrix temperature and B is the, I know constants, right? So AX equal to B. And I will have a system of equations for this entire mesh. And I will have a larger system for U, V, W and for temperature. And what I will do is I will solve this system of equations. So you will have a solver that is also needed, a system of equations solver also, which is needed. Okay. All right. Now I'm changing track into what you will see in OpenFOAM, right? So when you open OpenFOAM, this will be the file structure. Okay. Of course, people are going to take you through a detailed means for this. But the main thing I wanted to point out is this last. So you have 3 folders, which is called the 0 folder, which is your initial conditions. Your constant folder, like your properties, transport properties and all of that, fluid properties. And then your system folder. Okay. Now, when you're talking about the system folder, what was the first thing we talked about in the control volume method or FVM? We will first divide the domain into a mesh. So the block mesh dict file is where you will actually define your mesh. Okay. Then is the control dict, which will kind of allow you to set the time for your simulation. Okay. If there is a temporal term. Then what were the choices you made? Diffusion, advection, numerical schemes you had, right? So you have an FV schemes folder. And then once you've created an algebraic equation, you have a solver for the set of equations that are needed, which is FV solution, where you will choose what kind of solvers you will pick for your system of equations. Okay, so the same method which you followed in a normal CFD, meshing, then you will start integrating the governing equations to get the algebraic equation. In that process, you are making a numerical scheme choice, and then you are kind of solving the system of equations. Okay, now one small point, how you will solve those system of equations, right? So you have mass, and then let's talk only about the mass and the momentum equation, right? So typically what is used is a simple algorithm, which is an abbreviation for semi-implicit method for pressure linked equations. Okay, what does it mean? What you will do is, I think here I will summarize, you will first assume a U, you will assume a V initially, right? Because everything is unknown, all the cell centers are unknown. And you will solve this set of equations. Okay? And when you solve it, you will solve it without the P term. Okay? And what will happen is, once you've solved it, you will check whether the U and the V, okay, are solving your or are mapping up to your pressure correction. Okay. And once pressure correction, you will see some leftover term. That pressure you will correct, and then you will get the actual velocity. Okay. So it is more, though I am not going into the stepwise process of how this balance is maintained, what you have to understand is, firstly, there will be a predictor step. There's an assumed value. Then you predict basis that. Then there will be a corrector. Okay. And once you've corrected it, then you will repeat this process till convergence is obtained. Okay. And that is also, so this convergence settings, tolerance settings, number of iteration settings, all of this will come into this FV solutions. Okay. Tolerance, solver control, so on and so forth. Okay. So now with that, which is the entire picture of CFD flow. All right. So I have shown you certain things, right? You know how I have to transform a physical domain into a computational domain. What do I mean by that? Meshing. Correct? Now, what you need to understand very clearly is these things on the right, is going to define whether you are, going to successfully solve your CFD problem. What I've talked till now is the standard procedure, but there are certain subtleties involved in this procedure. And it is not that if you blindly follow the procedure which I told you, you will be successful. No. For you to successfully solve a CFD problem, which makes sense, which is actually correct, the numbers it's throwing out, whether it is physically correct or not, will depend on certain practices that you will follow. Okay? It depends on certain controls. Number one, when you're trying to, what are these? That becomes the next question, right? How do I ensure that this is correct? So the first question be the physical to a computational domain conversion happens through what is called meshing, right? And meshing in a very blanketed manner, like either you make everything super fine or you make it very coarse. What you should do to check whether you are getting a correct. So every mesh will have a different value, right? So then how do I know whether the mesh I am doing is a correct mesh? Is when you do something called the mesh independent study. Essentially, you will have to do at least 3 meshes of increasing resolution to see if any specific variable that you're interested in, whether it is invariant to this different mesh. Okay. Only then is your meshing of this domain correct. Otherwise, you are doing something wrong. A good example would be if I have like a nozzle which is blowing out some kind of a fluid, two-phase flow, right? So I do a whole rectangular box of which one part has the fluid coming out. Now somebody has told me that the boundaries should be finely meshed. So I spend my time meshing the boundaries of that rectangular domain in a very fine way, but the center is coarse. Then what will happen is your jet, which is your parameter of interest, will get completely lost. Okay. So even if you refine it 2-3 times, you will not capture it because you're not refining the region of interest. So meshing independence, zone-based meshing becomes very important. So in all your tutorials this time, please pay attention to that. Ask questions if you think why certain regions are not meshed properly or need meshing. Okay. Second, when you're writing equations, the choices that you make, which is the discretization schemes. Discretization means how do I write a PDE in terms of a Taylor series expansion, right? So when I do that, I will do second order, first order, so on and so forth. So whether your solver is first order or second order, there is always a give and take in that. Okay. So that is something you have to look at. If you choose second order and for very complex things, you might never solve it. Okay. If you make a first order approximation, your values might be slightly off. So your discretization schemes need to be very carefully thought of. Okay. You need to think of whether it is now flow is happening this way. Okay. Now if I do a central difference scheme, when I take equal weightage on both sides of the cells, it's not going to be correct, right? Because if flow is coming this way or temperature, hot air is coming this way, this point's temperature will get influenced by this more than the downstream. So you need to, a central difference scheme might not always be correct for your physical setting. So discretization schemes, choice plays a role. Solving it, is it simple solver which is best? This iterative means, now do I do segregated? Now when I say segregated solver, what do I mean? Flow you solve, then you solve temperature. But in certain cases, my flow is linked to my temperature. So that means I have to solve them as a coupled solver. If I solve it as segregated, you will land up with wrong values. Okay. And then finally, now people do this mistake several times. They will run the simulation. They will say it's converged. Then I'll ask them, what did you see? A residuals is all 10 power minus 5. Okay. But what is the actual parameter of your interest? It's the average temperature in the room. Okay. Did you monitor that? I haven't. Now, when he starts monitoring it, he will see that it's still fluctuating, right? That means your simulation has not converged. So, important things that you have to understand is scientific and engineering parameters of interest should be looked at. You have to look at, what do I mean by engineering parameters? So, somebody will do a CFD simulation and say temperature is rising. Okay, so it is a good problem. But what is your engineering parameter? What is the Nusselt number? What does a Nusselt number mean? It doesn't talk to you about the temperature at all. It talks to you about the heat transfer coefficient. Is the current setting augmenting heat transfer coefficient or not? So be very specific as to what is the output parameter you're looking at. Okay. Now, why am I talking to you about this for OpenFOAM? Because OpenFOAM allows you internal control, a lot more control than the other commercial softwares, which are black boxes, to fix any one of these things, like your discretization scheme, solver, equations, anything you can go in and change, which makes it a very powerful tool. For many reasons, some of the commercial softwares don't allow you to do that. Okay. But this allows you to do that. Okay. So what is OpenFOAM? OpenFOAM is an open source code. Okay. Which means it gives you full access to, reasonably full access to all the internal structure for you to make changes for your problem. Now, I don't want to write new things right now. I don't want to write a code from scratch. Okay. There is existing pre-written solvers of high level of complexity already available. So you can take that and tweak it to your need. Okay. And I'll tell you what the layered modular approach now means. Since I told you already existing softwares are there, with solvers are there, let us look at some of those. You have incompressible solver, where you have like blood flows, you need non-Newtonian conditions, you have non-Newtonian solvers. You have porous media solvers, right? You have SRF, which is a single rotating frame, right? But it is like a turbulent of non-Newtonian. But you also have SRF pimple form, which is a time step transient. This is steady solver, that's a transient solver. So many different combinations of solvers are already available. You can use them. Now, and this structure I've already told you. What I want to highlight is this is the schemes file, which we were talking about, right? What it allows you to do is it allows you to choose, like for the temporal terms, DDT schemes, your grad schemes, divergence schemes, right? Laplacian schemes. So for your Laplacian term, what is the scheme to use? This level of control it gives you. Okay. Now, what did I tell you? I told you that, if I want to, now let's come to the fact that, okay, I can choose the schemes. I can, choose solvers that are already there. What if I have a highly complex, say magnetohydrodynamics? I need to have the magnetic equation involved with my flow. I have the incompressible foam solver already. I need to add the magnetic equation to it. So that means I need to code a whole new equation. You can do that. Okay. And does that involve 1,000 lines of code? No. It allows you to do it in a very simplistic, intuitive format. Okay. What did we say? Equation for example, the transport equation contains an advection term, a Laplacian term, some other pressure gradient terms, or a temporal term. Okay. So Laplacian and advection, right? So open form allows you to very intuitively write it. So for example, Laplacian, if I say FVC Laplacian of A, it means calculate Laplacian of A. You don't have to write the background of what the Laplacian calculation is. If I want a grad of A, then grad of A gets calculated. D by dt of A gets calculated. So to write an equation, that is this turbulent kinetic energy equation, 5 lines are sufficient. D by dt k, divergence of phi k, then Laplacian of whatever k, and some other terms. Okay. So it is quite intuitive, easy to add your terms and move on. Okay. Except, okay, so this is the sample code. For example, I will finish the except part of it towards the end. So when I start the runtime, this is your Navier-Stokes equation, right? It says u equation dot solve. So when you look at a code, when you open up, immediately you will understand that this is your equation, momentum equation. Says u equation solve, apply the boundary conditions, and then write it. That's it. So it's very self-readable to a large extent. Okay. Okay. So in conclusion, which is very important, is open form is open source, and it allows you to really go in there and correct the points where, or have control of the points where, which was very critical for your CFD accuracy, right? Schemes, solver settings, linear equation solver settings, you can control it, but it also makes you more accountable. You cannot afford to use it like a black box. You have to know what is happening. Okay. It has easy modification and implementation facilities, which means it also helps you as a faculty to teach your students much more easily. Now, all kids like this commercial softwares like to click, 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 and you make them sit in front of you, ask some questions, and they will not know anything about it. Open form will force them to learn. Okay, so I think it's a very effective education tool. And of course, it's open source and free. So it's cost effective. So if you ask me, the CFD as we should know it, the inner nitty-gritties and not the black boxes controlling us, right? So we should know the nitty-gritties involved inside. We should have control over it and we should have command over it. And I think OpenFOAM is going to help you do that. And with that, I leave it up to you to ask me questions. Yeah, you can go ahead with your questions. Let me look at chat windows. Any questions?
Madam, I have a question.
Yes, please go.
During your discussion, you told that a solution may converge, but it may give some incorrect result, or means that result may not actually give engineering means outcome, right? So can you explain it? Actually, I'm not getting it properly.
Okay, so when you saw the methodology that I showed you, right? I did have a very functional conduction equation which I have written out, right? Or a transport equation which I have written out. Now it is my choice how I'm going to discretize it, correct? So if I use a central difference scheme for a particular discretization, right? Instead of taking, say, an upwind value, if I put it in there and I try and solve the equation mathematically, it's only a equation solver which is going to work through AX equal to B. And it is going to give me a throwing out some number which will repeatedly get, the errors from one iteration to other iteration, because the solver is quite stable. It is going to give you some number. And the residues will be 10 power minus 5, 10 power minus 6. So essentially your residuals will drop and it will flatten out. But if you actually see your temperature profile, for example, because of my choice of upwind, not having an upwind, maybe you will see like a fluctuating temperature profile because the temperature is not able to stabilize basis your assumption of it. So what I mean to say is just looking at the residuals will not talk about, well, it will tell you it has equations are solving, but there are errors in the physics which is probably not getting captured. That's what I mean. I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, ma'am. One thing, therefore, maybe that if we make the condition stringent more, then it will give a correct result.
Not necessary. If it's a complex problem, if you start making it too stringent, like your tolerance levels, it's never going to meet your tolerance levels. And it'll just exit. So typically, you don't have a one sort of solution for this. It's more beyond a point, it's an art. You will have to figure out for your simulation what set of numerical schemes work. So stringent is not always the best option.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, Aditya, that means convergent does not mean the correctness of the simulation. Absolutely correct.
Can you talk about any other solution acceleration schemes that are available in OpenFOAM?
Okay. See, there are several acceleration possibilities, but I don't have, there's a lot to talk about in that, but I don't have it right in front of me. So I would probably defer it to a later point because it's too advanced. Okay, so let me in brief tell you that OpenFOAM's solution acceleration schemes have to be looked at from a holistic point of view. For example, if you have a commercial software and there are some accelerative schemes which you choose, typically they're tuned to, because all the other settings are under their control like a black box, whatever you choose will work. Other things will not be allowed to be chosen. In OpenFOAM, that's not the case. And typically my experience is your acceleration schemes are very closely connected with your mesh generation also. So though options are available for some acceleration schemes, your mesh is going to be your deciding factor whether those schemes are successfully applied. So that I will tell you very shortly and quickly. But that is something you need to pay attention to. That's unique to
Thank
OpenFOAM.
you.
Yeah. Anybody else?
So I have one basic question regarding the mesh independent analysis. That suppose if I'm interested about the drag force or any other terms like pressure, what minimum number of quantities I have to look, like variation of the temperature or the forces or the thing to make it a mesh independent, or just a single thing is in?
A single parameter is sufficient for your application problem. For example, let me give you something. So flow around a cylinder, right? Or an airfoil. You probably will monitor the CD, right?
Yes.
Which is sufficient. Now, if I, on the other hand, if I'm doing like a boiling simulation, right? So I have a pipe flow where there's a lot of boiling that's happening for some nuclear reactor or something, where for me, it becomes important that I also not just look at the temperature on the wall, but also the amount of vapor which is getting collected at any particular cross section. So then I will have to monitor both these parameters to see if they are stabilized. And the other one step further to that is if it's a slightly bit very complex problem, then I'll have to have 3-4 parameters. And at one point, I have to start identifying which is the most important of them. Because typically you will feel that even with different schemes, one will work, one will get a steady value, whereas one will slightly oscillate. So again, even in that case, you'll have to make a choice which is one of the most important thing than the other. Yeah. So I have someone asking me in an FSI problem, what can be the parameter that we can look at for convergence apart from the residuals? Of course, you should look at your deformation stress terms. for your FSI problems. That becomes very, very critical. Okay, anyone else? Any questions?
For the flow only problem, flow heat transfer, turbulent, additional two more equations. What kind of RAM is required proportional to the mesh size?
What kind of
RAM size, yeah.
This is actually, you cannot put a number to it. For example, when I'm trying to do, okay, so let me answer that differently. It is actually your RAM size is not very critical for your turbulence equation problems. RAM size plays a limiting role in your mesh. So I could have a simple flow through a tube, but with very high mesh, your RAM will become your limiting factor. It won't even open, it will crash. For your run, it is the number of cores that you have which will matter. Okay. So of course, the higher limiting end of if you're pushing the system, the RAM application will come into play. But largely, your cores, if you have larger cores, it will be okay. Okay, now it doesn't mean it's going to crash. Now, one run, when I had a 32 core system, it ran in 3-4 days. But when I had a 64 core system, it gets done in 1 day. It's not that it's not going to run. I've had some runs run for 3 weeks with the same RAM, right? So it's more the core limitation. But where RAM hits the bottleneck is when your mesh starts becoming very large. Then your system, you can't, beyond a particular mesh size, you can't mesh more than that. So that will be the limiting factor. Okay.
Thank you.
So thanks a lot, ma'am. Such a long and informative session you have delivered.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So hope you enjoy the next 3 days of the workshop.